Salvete discipuli. Welcome to Caput Numerus Unus. That's chapter number 1. Day 2 vocabulario nomina. That's about your vocabulary nouns. So I'm assuming the prior knowledge of having watched the verb video. Just fair warning. Nunti boni, I got some good news to kick us off for nouns. First, in Latin, there are no articles, so there aren't any words for the, a, or an. What does this mean? Well, we kind of assume that they're in the nouns. So if you see a noun, you don't just say girl, for example. You say the girl or a girl, even though that word is not present, okay? So if I see the word puella, which means girl, I'm not going to just go girl. I'm going to think the girl or a girl if it's in a sentence to make it make better sense in English. So you add them in. Last thing I want to make sure you know is, before we get too far in any more grammar videos, that Latin is very consistent and doesn't have a lot of exceptions. So this means if I tell you that there's a grammar rule or I teach you a pattern, you can assume it will always be true. Okay, if it's like the example, then you can assume it works like the example. That's all you need to do. You don't need to second guess or question yourself. This is good for us, yes? The key to Latin, the endings of the words justify the meanings. What does this mean? Well, both for verbs and for nouns, and we'll find out with adjectives and pretty much any part of speech in Latin, the endings need to be looked at because they tell us things about the words grammatically, which means that they tell us how they're being used in the sentence, and therefore we cannot get meaning out of the sentence without looking at the endings. So really focus on endings for me. All right, specifically nouns now. The dictionary entry of a noun. Almost every single noun, so this is what your nouns are going to look like, are going to have 4 parts. This part, philia, this part, philii. Okay, so you're going to have 2 parts that look very similar. This is the main part of the word, right? This is the word, but there are 2 parts. Then you're going to have this letter here. And last, you're going to have the meaning. So let's break this down. Nouns in Latin have what are called cases. Cases are how the word is being used in the sentence. So these are based off of the endings again. Remember, we talked about verbs changing endings. Now we're talking about nouns changing endings. Well, the case are these ending changes, and they tell us whether something is a subject or if it's a direct object or whatever that the noun is doing in the sentence. The cases themselves are nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, vocative, and locative. Fancy, right? Well, the nominative is the first word in the dictionary entry. The genitive is the second word in the dictionary entry. So these 2 are going to be important for us to look at in this lesson. We're going to discuss the others later. Nouns also have genders in Latin, so that's what that letter was. It meant feminine. There's also a masculine gender, and there is a neuter gender. Neuter is a gender. It doesn't mean absence of gender. Many foreign languages have gender. It's actually a little strange to me that English does not classify all their nouns and genders. Some of these will be obvious, like mater, matris, which is feminine because, mothers are feminine. But some aren't, like cella, celli, which means chair, which you can see the top of the F here. It's also feminine, but why is a chair feminine? I don't know. So you got to memorize these. Just like with the verbs, you have to memorize the whole dictionary entry of these nouns. I'm going to expect you to be able to tell me all of them. Now let's look closely at each part again. Notice that the first 2 parts, these main parts, the actual Latin in the dictionary entry, are actually what are called cases, meaning that the nominative, or this first word, is the subject form of the word. So if the daughter is the subject and there's one of her, singular, that's what that means, then we use philia. But the genitive is the second part, and actually what it shows is ownership. So it shows when we use that part when the daughter owns something. For example, the daughter's, apostrophe S, dog. And there's one of her, then we use filii. Of course, that letter we now know is gender, and the last part is meaning. So one last thing about nouns is that they have declensions. Declensions are simply families of nouns. Remember, we had families of verbs called conjugations. Well, for nouns, it's declensions. All members of a declension have a set of endings that they share. Okay, it's kind of like people sharing a last name. This is just like that. And remember, these endings are super important because they allow us to make meaning in the sentence, right? Last point, if a noun is a member of a certain declension, it's always that declension. It cannot be adopted, okay? It cannot be adopted even if it doesn't like its family. To find out what declension or family a noun is part of, all we have to do is look at the genitive. That's it. So easy. So let's look at it. There are 5 families. There's first declension, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Real original names, I know. All first declension nouns have an AE in the genitive. All second declension nouns have an I in the genitive. All third declension nouns have an IS in the genitive. All fourth declension nouns have a US in the genitive. And all fifth declension nouns have an EI in the genitive. All right, that's it for nouns, guys. Walete.